UFC 315 is just a little over a week away, which means it's time for me to go through and make my full card predictions, breaking down every single matchup, main card, and the prelims, picking the winner, and then how I think they get it done. This pay-per-view does feel like it's a little bit pieces, parts. It's kind of just what happens for whatever reason when they go to Canada, but I still think this is a pretty fun card, some interesting matchups. I think the main event is kind of getting slept on, so pretty excited about UFC 315. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button, subscribe, drop your picks down below. But let's just dive right into it here. Starting off on the early prelims, we have Daniel Santos taking on Yeong Lee. And I think Santos is fun. 11-2 as a pro. He's 2-1 in the UFC. Fights with a super high pace. He's durable. Never been knocked out. Great kicks. Works the body. Has a pretty decent ground game. He's a fairly well-rounded fighter. His issue has just been his inactivity. His last fight was June of 2023. He has fought 3 times in his 5 years in the UFC, and he has pulled out of 5 different fights. So he's only fought 3 times. He's pulled out of 5. That's been the issue, but when he's actually out there, he's putting on, solid, fun performances. On the other side here with Lee, he is also 11-2 as a pro. He is 2-1 in the UFC, coming off a round 1 knockout loss against Haider Emil. The 2 wins are against Blake Bilder and Yiza, so it's not the highest level competition, for his wins, but, still picking up wins in the UFC is impressive. Fairly well-rounded, 4 knockouts, 3 submission wins, 4 decisions. Now, the inactivity does kind of scare me here with Santos, but if he's the same guy that we saw, the last time he fought, I just think he's the better dude, so I'm going to go with Santos by decision. Then we're going to have Modestas Bukauskas taking on Yeong Cutelaba, and Bukauskas on his second UFC stint, really going on a nice run here, 4-1 since getting back in the promotion, back-to-back finishes in his last 2 fights. I do think, he's been facing some lower level competition than Yeong has. Yeong's pretty consistently fighting like those dudes, right in the fringe top 15. Bukauskas is primarily a striker, but did pick up a submission win in one of his last 2, but typically he's going to go out there, just look to strike. Cutelaba fights are just always fun. They're chaotic. He's kill or be killed. He has 13 wins by knockout, 3 by submission, only 3 by decision. In his losses, he has been finished in 7 of his 9 pro losses, and I really think he's at his best when he is getting his wrestling going. He has a 52% takedown accuracy. He averages 4.2 takedowns per 15 minutes, and he's coming off a very impressive submission win against Erslan, who is really on a roll to start off his UFC career. So it's light heavyweight. The odds of a finish are pretty high. I could see this one going either way, but I'm going to lean towards an Yeong Cutelaba round 1 knockout. I think he could potentially get it done on the feet, but I think it's also possible maybe he lands a shot, finds a takedown, and then finishes it with some ground and pound. Now, sticking around in that same weight class, we have Navajo Stirling taking on Ivan Erslan. And Stirling's a pretty fun prospect at light heavyweight. You don't get a ton of, super interesting prospects up at that weight class. He trains at City Kickboxing. Big dude, big frame for the weight class, 6'4", 79-inch reach. He is 6-0 as a pro, so not a ton of experience, but undefeated, 4 knockout wins. He had a pretty clean win in his UFC debut. I was actually at that one. I will say his opponent didn't really seem like, it seemed like he was trying to just not get finished. So he didn't finish, kind of a lower level opponent. It's not a great look, but his opponent was just fighting super passively. I'd say my biggest concern for Stirling is probably just his takedown defense. He was taken down 3 times in that debut, not against someone who's known for having, amazing takedown offense. So something to look out for there. On the other side here with Erslan, he lost his UFC debut, but it was against Yeong Cutelaba, so, pretty tough test in your UFC debut. He is just going to be the way more experienced guy here. He's 33 years old, 14-4 record, also has 7 fights in KSW, which is a very highly regarded promotion outside the UFC. So even his non-UFC comp, it's not like he's going up against random regional dudes. KSW, very legit promotion. And then he is a knockout artist. 10 of his 14 wins come by knockout. Once again, it's light heavyweight. I think both these guys can KO the other one. Both can get knocked out. I am just going to side with Stirling here. Like I said, I think it could go either way, but I do just think he's cleaner on the feet, super dangerous. I'm going to go with Stirling round 1 knockout. Then we're going to have the first women's fight here with Jessica Andrade taking on Jasmine Jasudavicius. Jessica Andrade honestly just has an insane resume of opponents. She's pretty much fought everyone at 115 and 125. She picked up back-to-back wins at 115 and now is going back up to 125, which I just don't really like. She's an explosive, powerful striker, going to go out there, throw in combination, wing big hooks. I just think she's very undersized for 125. She's 5'1", 62-inch reach. Now, that's not to say her power doesn't translate. She could pretty much knock women out at any weight class. It's just the range, being able to close the distance, dealing with the grappling. Those are the issues where you really see, the size come up for Andrade, because she can be controlled by solid grapplers. We saw it against Tatiana Suarez, Erin Blanchfield, Valentina Shevchenko, and you can see two of those names are up at 125, and the one at 115 is just like an amazing wrestler in Tatiana Suarez. On the other side here with Jasmine, she is super rangy, for the 125 weight class, which is going to be pretty big size difference compared to Andrade. 5'8", 68-inch reach. She pushes a very high pace. She's active on the feet, but she's really looking to set up her wrestling, rack up control time, land her ground and pound. She averages 2.6 takedowns per 15 minutes. She's landed at least 2 takedowns in each of her last 5 fights. And I do think she's kind of turned the corner in her last 4 matchups here, where it seems like her ground and pound and submission offense has kind of really come along. She's been able to blend the two very well. I do think on the feet, she's a little bit hittable. She's pretty loose, can be a little bit reckless. So that is a concern going up against, someone who has the power of Jessica Andrade. This was honestly shocking to me. You look at Jasmine, she's only been in the UFC for a few years now, kind of, a rising contender. Andrade has been around forever. Jasmine Jasudavicius is 36 years old and Andrade is 33. And when I was doing my prep, one of my points was going to be this is the rising contender, kind of the prospect going up against the veteran who's kind of on the way down. And just age-wise, it's not like that at all. I mean, Jasmine is 3 years older. Now, I do think age in MMA can work very differently, where some people can peak when they're mid-20s, late 20s. Other dudes are peaking and they're mid to late 30s. So I would still say the point is there where Jasmine is rising, Andrade has kind of stalled, but Andrade still could have a ton of juice left in the tank at only 33 years old. I mean, really just crazy the amount of people she has fought and still having so much time, left in her career. I do just think this is a bad stylistic matchup for her. I think Jasmine is going to go out there. She's going to want to wrestle. I think she has the frame to stay outside on the feet. And Andrade isn't really someone who's going to go out and put an insane amount of volume. Typically, she's winning stamping rounds with those big moments. And I just don't know how many, if any, she's going to get here against Jasmine. So I'm going to go with Jasmine Jasudavicius by decision. I do think she could find a submission win, but decision is going to be my pick. Then I believe this is Jasmine's teammate. We have Mike Malott taking on a Charles Radtke. And Malott had a lot of hype after his first 3 UFC fights, 3 finishes to start off his UFC career. He got the opportunity to kind of crack in the rankings against Neil Magny, looked really good for about the first 14 minutes of the fight, and then literally completely ran out of gas and got finished. It was a very rare finish, and he was just completely exhausted at the end of that 3rd round when he got finished. And it wasn't a fight that took place at a super high pace. Overall, just very odd. And then his most recent fight, he won a decision against Trevin Giles. It was just, not a super entertaining fight. He's a big welterweight, 6'1", 73-inch reach. He's well-rounded, 11 wins, 4 are by knockout, 6 are by submission. On the other side here with Radtke, he is 3-1 in the UFC, hits pretty hard, solid wrestling. He won his UFC debut on control time, and then his other 2 have been impressive round 1 knockouts. Has a really nice left hook. I'd say it's probably his best punch on the feet. I could definitely see this taking place on the feet. I don't think Radtke is a dominant enough wrestler to take down and control Malott. Malott also has great jiu-jitsu, great wrestling defense. So I think this one could definitely stay on the feet. I like the way Malott manages distance. He uses his frame very well, throws low kicks from the outside. We saw that in the Trevin Giles fight. Also Neil Magny. I think both these guys could be live for a finish. I'm just going to slightly lean towards Mike Malott here. I like his ability to stay on the outside, kind of pick at Radtke. I think Radtke might get reckless, and Malott could catch him. I'm going to go round 2 KO for proper Mike Malott. Then moving over to Marc-Andre Barriault taking on Bruno Silva. I think both these guys are probably fighting for their jobs at this point. Marc-Andre Barriault has lost 3 straight fights. He's been knocked out in back-to-back outings. And then for Silva, he has lost 4 straight, and he has lost 6 of his last 7. So honestly, kind of a miracle. He's still getting another shot here. This is a striker versus striker matchup, and I think it's the power and like knockout ability of Silva against the cardio and the pace of Marc-Andre Barriault. For Silva, 20 of his 23 wins come by knockout. For Barriault, he is 6th in active middleweight significant strikes per minute, so he's going to go out there. He's going to try to put on a pace. The problem here for Bruno, though, is, I talked about the rough results as of late. He's also just like kind of getting beat up on the feet in his last 6 fights. He's been dropped by Chris Weidman, Brendan Allen, and Gerald Meerschaert. Like, getting dropped by Chris Weidman at this stage in his career is bad. Getting dropped by Gerald Meerschaert at any stage in his career is even worse. Even Brendan Allen, like, he's not known for his striking. He's more of a grappler. So, like, that's not great. The durability hasn't really been there. He's getting dropped. I will say, like, he's rarely getting finished. His durability has been fine. For Barriault here, also his durability questions. 3 of his last 5 losses are by round 1 knockout. So if Bruno goes out there and clips him early, like, this could get done in the first few minutes. I'm still going to lean towards Marc-Andre Barriault. Even though the durability hasn't been great, he's at least like been competitive, winning some fights, in his last like 5, 6, 7. Bruno Silva has just been like pretty much losing everything. So I think he contemplated retiring, like he was taking a break for his mental health after one of his most recent losses. So the vibes just don't seem great from the Bruno Silva camp. I'm going to go with Barriault by decision. I could see like a later finish, second half of the second round, third round, a knockout, but Bruno has been fairly durable, even though he has been dropped in a few fights. Barriault doesn't really have like that nuclear power. I'll pick him by decision. Then at bantamweight, we are going to have Brad Katona taking on Bekzat Almakhan. And in his second UFC stint here, Brad Katona has gone 2-2. He's someone who's going to go out. He wants to mix things up. He's landed 10 takedowns in his last 3 fights. He is willing to, kind of get into scraps on the feet if he has to, as we saw with the Ultimate Fighter win against Cody Gibson. The thing with Katona is his fight is very likely to go to decision. He has 4 finishes in his 14 pro wins, and then all 4 of his losses have been by decision. So he doesn't have much finishing upside, and he's also been very durable throughout his career. For Bekzat here, you might remember him for his debut, his only fight in the UFC. It was in 2024 against Umar Nurmagomedov. So I guess the UFC couldn't find an opponent for Umar. I believe it was after he pulled out of the first time the Corey Sandhagen fight was booked. They bring in Bekzat on his UFC debut, which is just an insane, opponent to make your debut against. But he's 27 years old. He's 11-2 as a pro, was kind of control grappled in that Umar fight, but the dude hits hard. He has 9 knockout wins, 1 submission win, only 1 decision. He dropped Umar early in that fight and then just like couldn't stop the takedowns. But obviously, like, Umar's a very different level than Brad Katona in terms of his wrestling. He throws great kicks. Kind of a fun fighter. It'll be interesting to see how he does, pretty much like a year layoff since that last fight. So I'm going to go with Almakhan here by decision. I think he's just going to be the much better striker. I think he's cleaner, going to land his kicks. I think Katona's going to try to wrestle. I don't think he's going to have a ton of success. I think the durability is going to hold up. Almakhan is live for a finish, but the pick will be by decision. And then I believe we have arrived at the main card here with a very fun fight at lightweight. We have Benoit Saint Denis taking on Joel Alvarez. And it's kind of crazy how quickly like the Benoit Saint Denis experience has shifted from initially he was getting like this huge push from the UFC, right? He breaks into the rankings. All of a sudden he's getting launched into a fight against Dustin Poirier. And then like pretty much a little over a year later, now it just feels like he's being absolutely fed to the wolves here with his Joel Alvarez matchup. In the UFC, Benoit started 5-0 at lightweight. Then he gets knocked out by Dustin Poirier. He then gets finished by Renato Moicano and kind of like his step back in competition. And like the Poirier fight, I guess it was competitive, but he just ran out of gas, didn't have the defense on the feet. The Moicano fight was extremely dominant. And so now you're in this spot where it's like, he looked good early against Poirier. I want to say he was a betting favorite in that fight. So like the betting odds had him as like a favorite to potentially like win that fight, which could have been for the number one contender spot. And then he's just getting thoroughly dominated by Renato Moicano. So it's just like weird to see where he's at this point in his career. He's also just not taking a ton of time and like continuing to take these tough matchups, but he's going to go out there. He's going to fight at a very, very high pace. I mean, we've seen before he fought Dustin Poirier, when he would go up against dudes, he would just melt them with his pressure. He's going to rip his left body kicks. He mixes his striking in with the wrestling very well. So he's going to have a lot of output on the feet. He's also going to wrestle relentlessly. On the other side here with Joel Alvarez, he is also very dangerous, but kind of for different reasons. He is an 100% finish rate in his career, 5 knockouts, 17 submissions. In his last 8 UFC fights, he is 7-1, with his only loss coming to Arman Tsarukyan. He also has a very unique fighting style where he didn't defend a single takedown until his 7th UFC fight. It was pretty much like, if you want to try to shoot on me, you're going to run into a submission. I will, accept it and I'll work off my back if I don't like lock in a guillotine or something. He has, started to defend takedowns since then, but kind of a crazy stat. Like I remember when he was going up against Arman Tsarukyan, the stat was that he literally had a 0% takedown defense in the UFC, which at the time he, I think, was like 4-1, 5-1, like a very solid record with just no interest in stuffing a takedown. I feel like this fight is going to go one of two ways. I think the first one is that Benoit Saint Denis is over aggressive. He's going to run into a big shot from Joel Alvarez, or he is going to run into a submission, potentially like shoot into a guillotine, something like that. I could also see it where if BSD can weather an early storm and Alvarez doesn't find the early finish, then Benoit Saint Denis will just melt him with his pressure and find a finish in like the second or third round. I think both of these are very realistic possibilities. I am going to lean towards Joel Alvarez here. I'm going to pick him by round 1 knockout. And we've pretty much seen against everyone, like as of late, not named Arman Tsarukyan, he's just going to have such an extreme power advantage. He is sharp. I think Benoit Saint Denis leaves himself open. So I think he can threaten with the submissions. Maybe that kind of like limits the wrestling offense of Benoit Saint Denis. And then even though Saint Denis is dangerous, he is very reckless. I think Alvarez catches him, and I think he finishes him in the first round. It would kind of be a bummer. I mean, not for Alvarez. Like, I like Alvarez. It would just be a bummer for Benoit, though. I mean, going from, like, the Poirier fight to potential 3-fight losing streak, like, this does seem like a big fight for him to just, stay in that top 15. Continuing on with the main card, we have Jose Aldo taking on Aiemann Zahabi. And I'm going to be honest, the UFC's matchmaking of Jose Aldo here in, like, this post-retirement run has pretty much just been awful. He is still so good, and they're just giving him like these weird, like low profile, I guess they're like prospect matchups, but like they're putting him against dudes that like realistically don't have the highest ceiling, right? Jonathan Martinez, Mario Bautista, and then now Aiemann Zahabi. And I'm not blaming like the dudes that are getting booked against him. Like, it's not their fault. Obviously, you're going to take a fight against Jose Aldo, but it just doesn't make sense because you could be putting on like these big fun fights with some bigger names. Like, I think the fight to make was Chito Vera, Jose Aldo 2. Like, that's the one I would have made. I think you could have gone Figgy against Jose Aldo. Those would have been fun matchups. But like, he's just not the guy to kind of get a prospect over on because he's still really, really good. So he's going to go out there. He's going to beat a guy like Jonathan Martinez. Mario Bautista, it's like, I guess Bautista won, but like, did he really win? I think he lost in the eyes of everyone. And so it's like, you're giving him a prospect and the payoff should be, all right, the prospect beats Jose Aldo. They're going to improve their stock. Instead, I think, Mario Bautista's stock might never be lower than it is right now because the fight was so awful because he had to just hold him against the cage to beat Jose Aldo at this stage in his career. Now, I think Aiemann Zahabi's probably going to fight a more fun fight. But it's just still like, what's the payoff here? Do they think Zahabi's going to be like a top 10, top 5 bantamweight? Like, I struggle to see it. So I think it's weird, but I guess we'll just dive into the breakdown here. Aldo, obviously, super clean boxing. He's very defensively responsible, just sees things so well. He's going to check pretty much every single kick that you throw at him. And then pretty much outside of the Petr Yan title fight, like the way to beat Jose Aldo at 135 has been to hold him against the fence. Now, I think he won the Mario Bautista fight. The third round, in my opinion, is the clear, like, control versus actual damage, where it quite literally does not matter if Bautista held him against the fence for 4.5 minutes if Aldo outstruck him and landed the more damaging strikes, which in my opinion he did. But the other fight that he lost as of late was against Merab, where Merab was at least trying to take him down. It's just like, he's like impossible to take down. So he clearly won, but like, you don't just go out there and outclass Jose Aldo at 135, I guess, unless your name is Piotr Jan. On the other side here with Aiemann Zahabi, I think he's impressive because I feel like he's an example of a guy who's not an elite athlete, doesn't have the cleanest technique, but he is a top 15 fighter in what I think is a top 2 weight class in the UFC, and that is very impressive. It's kind of similar to Belal in the main event, where it's like he doesn't have any insane tools. He's just really good, has his own style, and he gets it done. I guess I will say he is pretty powerful. Like, he hits pretty hard for bantamweight, but like, he's not a freak athlete. He's not overly explosive. He just, is a very solid, crafty fighter. He's got this like very square stance. He's kind of like hunched over in his posture, but he throws super well in combination. I think it helps him, extend his combos, switch his stance. He mixes his punches and his kicks very well, has a really, really nice long jab, and then has solid cardio, but isn't super interested in pushing a crazy high pace. Like, if the other guy wants to be patient, he's fine being patient. And then not someone who's looking to wrestle, only one takedown in his UFC career. I think it's interesting to see how he approaches this matchup because, like I said, he is very patient. That is not the way to fight Jose Aldo. You want to put a pace on him because if he's just comfortable sitting there in a striking fight, like, you are probably going to lose against Jose Aldo. So I'm still going to lean Aldo. I still think he has a lot left in the tank here. If Zahabi won, that would be a major accomplishment, especially if he could do it just like outstriking him. But I still got to ride with Jose Aldo here. I will pick him by decision. And then we have 3 fights left at this point. The next one up is Alexa Grasso taking on Natalia Silva. This is a very fun striker versus striker matchup in the women's strawweight division. Both these women average under 0.5 takedowns per 15 minutes, so I'd be very surprised to see either of them. Maybe not shocked to see one of them go to the wrestling, especially if it's not going great, but I'd be shocked to see one of them really have success in the grappling department. Grasso's style is much more boxing heavy. Silva is much more kick heavy. Grasso's going to want to get her boxing going. Silva's going to want to stay at range, use the long range weapons. Alexa Grasso is coming off that trilogy against Valentina Shevchenko, where she won the first one, second one was a draw, third one just, completely control wrestled for I think Valentina had 16 plus minutes of control time. And then I will say she said she suffered a broken leg in November. Now, I'm not sure if this was somehow lost in translation, but I don't think if you break your leg, you're going to be back this quickly. It could have been some minor fracture, whatever. But it is, important to point out that she is coming off a potentially serious injury here heading into this matchup. On the other side with Silva, she has been very impressive so far in the UFC. She is 6-0. She's kind of cruised through, a couple ranked fighters in Jessica Andrade, Viviane Araujo, and she just puts a pace on. She's going to outland her opponents by a lot. So far, per 15 minutes, she lands 5.19 significant strikes per minute, or not per 5, just 5.19 significant strikes per minute, and she only absorbs 2.35. So she's nearly outlanding her opponents by 3 strikes per minute, which is insanely impressive. She has great distance management. She moves really well laterally, can just be on her bike the entire fight, where she's never just a sitting duck, an easy target. She's very hard to hit. She's hard to hit clean, and it can be exhausting trying to chase someone around the cage, for 15 minutes. She has great kicks, especially her lead leg kicks, like her lead leg head kick. She can work the body well. And even though she doesn't go a ton to her boxing, it seems a little bit sporadic. She does have some power on the feet. She's just so explosive. She can dart in and out so quickly. I do think this is a really fun matchup here. And I'm actually favoring Silva in this matchup. I feel like she has the style to just kind of pick at Grasso, outpoint her on the feet. I will say, Grasso has had some big moments in recent fights. That's how she beat Valentina. In those 3 fights, Valentina was winning the vast majority of the minutes, right? She's, controlling rounds. She's doing fine on the feet. But it was those big moments from Grasso where she lands the takedown, she finds the submission, she drops Valentina, in the second fight, can sting her on the feet. And so can she have any of those moments against Silva? I think she's going to need to win this fight, but I'm actually going to lean towards Silva here by decision. And then we have arrived at the co-main event, the woman I was just mentioning, Valentina Shevchenko, defending her title against Manon Fiorot. And I was initially surprised because Valentina Shevchenko is actually a betting underdog in this matchup. But after I looked into it, I do kind of understand. Not saying I agree with it, but I can see where the odds are kind of coming from here. We saw Valentina get the belt back with a dominant grappling win. She landed 8 takedowns and racked up 16 minutes of control time. On the feet, she's a very clean striker, mixes up her targets well, really solid kicks. I feel like most MMA fans think of Valentina as a striker, but the wrestling, the grappling has really kind of been the separator in a lot of her title wins. She doesn't have like the insane power on the feet where if she's going to go out there and just strike for 15 minutes, like the rounds are going to be somewhat competitive. She can still beat the vast majority of the women in this weight class in a striking fight, but the wrestling is really where she's able to stamp these fights, stamp these rounds. She's landed at least 3 takedowns in her last 8 fights and has a 64% career takedown accuracy, which is an insanely high number. Now, on the other side with Manon Fiorot, she might not be, the most well-known name. She hasn't fought in a while. She's just been kind of sitting around waiting for this title shot, but she is very, very good. She is 7-0 in the UFC, has wins against Erin Blanchfield, Rose Namajunas, Caitlin Chikagian, Mayra Buena Silva. She's pretty much fought like 3 number 1 contender fights in a row where against Caitlin Chikagian, she had been the woman where it's like, she's going to hang around the top 3. If you beat her, you're getting a title shot. That did not happen. Then she got the Rose fight. The title shot did not happen. Then she beat Blanchfield. She had to deal with the trilogy taking forever, but she's finally getting that opportunity. Similar to what I talked about with Natalia Silva, Fiorot's just going to go out there and she has consistently outlanded her opponents. She averages 6.26 significant strikes per minute to only 3.77 absorbed. So pretty much landing like 2.5 more strikes than her opponent per minute. Her takedown defense has also been insanely impressive. And I think that's the big kind of, wild card in this matchup. In the UFC, she has a 93% takedown defense. Erin Blanchfield, someone who's known as a very, solid grappler in the weight class, went 0 for 3 against her and was just pretty much a sitting duck on the feet. I also think Manon is going to be the physically bigger woman in this matchup. I think she's going to be taller. I do think she could have maybe not like a physicality advantage, but I do just think like if you took their fight day weights, I do think she would be the heavier woman in there. And so if Valentina can't wrestle, like it's going to be a problem. If she has to stand and strike with Manon, I'm not saying she can't win, but that is a potential problem. I think the difference though, and like even though Manon's takedown defense has been great, when you look at Blanchfield, like that's really what you have to worry about. It's not that she's a terrible striker, but like you compare Valentina in a striking battle against Erin Blanchfield, like Valentina's going to chew her up. So against Valentina, you have to worry about both. It's not just like defend the takedown, defend the takedown, defend the takedown, and then you can have your way on the feet. Like you need to defend yourself on the feet and the takedowns. Valentina, blends things very well. So I'm still going to side with the champ here in Valentina. Even though she's the underdog, I'm going to pick Valentina by decision. Now, would I be shocked if Manon won? No, I would not, but I am going to lean towards Valentina at this point. And then the main event here, Belal Muhammad taking on JDM. I think this fight has the potential to be very fun. Belal goes out there. He's going to push a pace. Obviously not known for being a super entertaining fighter, but I think stylistically, it kind of matches up well with JDM to make a fun fight. I think JDM is one of the most fun strikers in the UFC. We haven't seen him in a while, so it'll be fun to see him back in there getting a title shot here. Belal Muhammad's legit. He makes the most out of not having like elite athleticism. I kind of mentioned this when I was talking about Zahabi, but like he has strong cardio. He's a good wrestler. He's landed 5+ takedowns in the Leon Luque Wonderboy fight, but he doesn't have like these crazy physical advantages. He does not hit hard. He's not super explosive. He just has his style. He's worked really hard, and he's just overall a very good, well-rounded fighter. I do think his striking's like a little bit underrated. He beat Gilbert Burns, Sean Brady without landing a single takedown. Not going to have a ton of power, but he can put the pace on, decent boxing, and if he can just like overwhelm you and like pressure you on the feet, it's just going to set up his wrestling and you're kind of toast. That's kind of what happened against Leon. Like he was just overwhelmed, with the pressure and then the mixing in of the wrestling. He just kind of folded in that matchup. for JDM, I think he's probably the best boxer in the weight class. When you watch him, he doesn't throw super fast. Like, he's not super quick with his strikes, but it's like everything lands. And when it does land, they're just like these clubbing shots. He hits hard. He throws well in combination. He can fight from both stances. He can switch stances, in the middle of combinations, and he works the body really well. The big issue here is the wrestling defense. Now, I think prior to the Gilbert Burns fight, the wrestling defense, the grappling concerns were a little bit overblown because a lot of them stemmed from the Basil Hafez fight, where it was short notice. He was supposed to fight Sean Brady, and he was kind of controlled on the ground against Hafez, making his UFC debut. But if you go and watch that fight back, like, maybe the getting controlled part is not great, but like, he was putting himself in a lot of those positions where he was trying to attack submissions when he probably shouldn't have. Now, if we're being honest here, if that was the JDM that was fighting Sean Brady, I think he's probably getting, absolutely dominated on the ground. But the big issue, in my opinion, was the Gilbert Burns fight. So, like, going into Gilbert Burns, I think the concerns were overblown. Then he fights Burns, and Gilbert Burns goes 7 for 11 on takedowns. And Gilbert Burns is like one of the best jiu-jitsu players in the UFC, but he is not a great wrestler. One of the biggest issues with Burns is that he has the jiu-jitsu tools, but he hasn't had the wrestling to set it up. He goes out there and is pretty much just like taking JDM down at will. And I just think Belal is a significantly better wrestler than Gilbert Burns, and that's a real problem. Now, JDM can be resilient. He's not going to be resigned to just laying on his back. We saw it in that third round against Gilbert Burns. He was probably down on the scorecards, even though I think it probably should have been 1-1. I think this idea that he was like just getting outclassed is just not true. That's like if you're valuing control over damage. But like, he was on the ground. He could have just like ridden out that third round. He's able to get a scramble, get to his feet, land a big knee, finish Gilbert Burns. And so what's interesting about this matchup is a lot of people seem to be counting JDM out because that takedown defense. And that certainly is a factor, and that could be, the reason why he loses here. But I also don't want to discount just like the crazy advantage it is in a matchup to have like infinitely more finishing upside, where Belal Muhammad, he does not hit hard on the feet. I think his only knockout in the UFC is the standing TKO against Sean Brady. He doesn't have a single knockdown in the UFC. So he's not powerful. He's not going to like clip and knock JDM out on the feet. And then he's not a submission threat. So like, Belal's way to win this fight is, push a pace, win a bunch of rounds, and win the decision. It's a big deal that JDM has the upside to finish this fight at any point. He could clip Belal. Belal doesn't have some sort of like nuclear chin. He could work the body. And so that is a big factor here. We're like, sure, if it goes the distance, Belal should win, but there's no guarantee it goes all 25 minutes because JDM could put him out at any point. I also think the body work could potentially slow the pace of Belal, which is an interesting factor. He just cannot get held down. And so I'm going to be honest, I've gone back and forth here. I know a lot of people are just penciling in Belal. I'm very tempted to pick Jack Della Maddalena, but I'm not going to. I do think the wrestling defense is just concerning. And like, could he get taken down and still find a finish, early in a round or something? Sure. But it's just like the more minutes he is being held down, controlled, clinched, there's just, less opportunities for him to actually land that big punch and find the finish. So I am going to pick Belal, but I certainly would not be shocked if JDM found a knockout here. And that is going to wrap it up for my full card predictions. Let me know your thoughts down below. If you stuck around till the end, thank you. I appreciate it. Hit that like button, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.